right, gentlemen, we are live. Hello,
Good
hello,
morning.
everyone. Happy Thursday. It's your favorite optometrist, Dr. Daryl Glover. And today I'm teaming up with Dr. Adam Ramsey. Dr.
Yeah,
Ramsey, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing wonderful, wonderful.
Awesome, awesome. Well, today's guest is pretty spectacular, you guys. He basically has 35 years in the eye care industry. He's a forward thinker, a leader in innovation, and an advocate in full scope optometry, and an expert in telehealth, which is what we're going to talk about today. Friends and family, please welcome our colleague, the great Dr. John Rumpakis. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great, Daryl. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about being here.
Well, we're super excited about you being on the show because, I mean, as I mentioned before, you have a lot of time in the eye care industry, which means you're just a wealth of knowledge. I mean, I wish I could just be your shadow and absorb everything that goes around with you. I had the opportunity of hanging out. What was it, Monday with you on a board that we sit on together, and I was just able to just soak in all that information that you were given, especially when it comes to telehealth. So I definitely want to dive into that today with you. But before we get started with that, if you don't mind just sharing with the world who you are. I mean, let's just take it from the beginning. From why did you jump into the world of optometry? Where did you go to school, and also all the various businesses, because you wear a lot of hats in this eye care industry.
Well, I mean, nothing real special. I graduated in 1984 from Pacific University, so long time ago. Probably before most of us were even born. But that's okay, because being out there for 35 years, really was at the start of when optometry was coming into just first using diagnostic agents, and then through the therapeutic fights and surgical privileges and all of those different types of things. So it's been a wild ride, a really great ride. One of the things that is great about optometry is that we really are a profession that can define itself, and that's been our strength, and it's been our problem along the way as well. And one of the areas that I've always focused in has been the business side of optometry. Even while I was in clinical practice, I'm not, in clinical practice any longer. Sold my practice in the late 1990s. I taught at Pacific, developed their, I guess you'd call their business management, their medical economics program there, taught there for over a decade, and then started a consulting business in the late 1990s, and pretty much have devoted my career to helping our colleagues in the area of economics, compliance, coding. I'm currently right now probably the reimbursement or coding consultant for probably 65% of the companies in the ophthalmic world. So
wow.
When you get a new code and you're using a new piece of equipment or something like that, hopefully I had a nice part in being able to develop and make sure that optometry was part of it, and that we had a reimbursement schedule was equal to that of ophthalmology, and making sure that we can participate with all of the insurance plans. It's been crazy things. If I look back even within the last 5-10 years, I'll use a company like BioTissue. We all use amniotic membranes. Adam, you and I were at a dry eye conference recently, right? Yep. And so we're talking about things on the technologies that have come along. Well, back in 2012, when BioTissue retained me, optometrists were only allowed to use amniotic membranes in 8 states. And so my very first thing that I did for them was get the amniotic membrane to be used by optometrists in all 50 states and reimbursed equally to that of ophthalmology in all 50 states. So, I do most of my work, even though I do probably 250 lectures a year around the country. Most of my work is behind the scenes with the companies, and really trying to advocate for optometry to keep us independent, to try to keep us on parity with ophthalmology, making sure that our privileges that we have, our licensure, that we can practice and get reimbursed for what we do properly as our profession grows.
Do you think you're still going to keep up that 250 lectures this year? Are they gone virtual? Are you able to go virtual and keep that 250 number?
I'll tell you what, it's at least nice to know that my airline status has been extended for another full year, right? Because it's no travel, right? Everything got wiped off the plate. So I think that this video conferencing and all of these types of things, as these technologies improve, I think it probably will be a pretty good substitute for most of the things that we're doing. Not obviously large face-to-face meetings or educational events, but I think it'll find its footing and it'll probably grow.
What is your airline of choice?
That was my next question, man. Because you know who I'm loyal
You got a Delta man over there.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, I've been with American Airlines since 1989. So
oh wow,
long time. I just crept over the 5 million mile mark with them. So
Ooh. That means you get upgraded to first class.
You don't get more.
You get upgraded to first class. That's every time you come in, it's first class or nothing for you.
Yeah. No, obviously you don't fly American, so that's not. And those are my friends out there who fly American. They understand exactly what I'm talking about. I sat next to a guy one time that he, on his little card, he was 11 million miles that he had flown with them, and I said, so you must get upgraded all the time. He goes, no, I don't get anything special. Just the way the airlines work.
That's why Daryl likes Delta.
That's why. Yeah, I'm a Delta man all day, man. When I walk on that plane, they treat me like I own the company or something. So I stay with Delta. I'm not at diamond status. I'm always there almost every year. I'm platinum, but majority of the time when I fly, I'm either Delta Comfort Plus, but most of the time I am truly first class.
Yeah.
And the thing is, once you get that status, it's hard to go anywhere else. So if I ever take a stop in travel, I'm always going to have to buy a first class ticket because I'm so used to just that treatment, that royalty when you get on that airline or that airplane that they give you. There is a difference. And back in the day, I never thought there was such a difference, but there is a difference. But but let's jump into it, man. Let's talk about what you're an expert in outside. Well, you're an expert in everything, but let's hone in on what's really important in today's eye care market and also just the healthcare industry in general. Telehealth. There's your traditional definition of telehealth, and then there's more in the moment definition of telehealth. If you don't mind just giving a good overview of what telehealth is, that'd be great to get started with.
Yeah. So let me kind of back up and say telehealth is not something that's new. Telehealth has been around for probably formally, 3 to 4 years as far as codes go and the CPT development of that and trying to allow physicians to be able to see patients without the patient having to come into the office. Traditionally, though, prior to the COVID-19 public health emergency, telehealth had been fairly restrictive in its use. The patient had to be in a metropolitan service area, a provider shortage area, and they actually had to travel to go to a specific type of facility in order to be able to take advantage of doing a remote physician encounter. So telehealth in and of itself has always been an extremely restrictive type of a use. It was developed to help patients who lived in shortage areas be able to have access to doctors and not have to travel and not have to do an office visit. But obviously with the COVID-19 stay-in-place restrictions that we saw unprecedented moves by Department of Home and Health and Human Services, CMS, everybody trying to really make sure that patients could have access to their doctors and, more importantly, eliminate a lot of the liability and restrictions that physicians had in being able to see their patients. So I think what I can do is sum up in 4 easy points what the difference was between telehealth traditionally and telehealth, in the moment as we live right now.
Yeah.
So very first thing is the patient location restrictions were eliminated. So no longer did the patient have to live in a shortage area in order to be able to be eligible for telehealth. They said everybody is eligible for telehealth no matter where they live. Number 2, the patient did not have to travel anywhere to take advantage of telehealth. They could be anywhere, and most importantly, underscore their home. And that's what really changed the big face of it. Number 3, traditionally telehealth had to be provided through a HIPAA secure portal that the doctor had on their through their practice, whether they were using a specific platform or was built into their website. Traditionally, telehealth always had to be through a HIPAA secure messaging system or a HIPAA secure synchronous live two-way communication like we're doing here type of a vehicle. no longer. They're allowing contemporary technologies like FaceTime or Skype or anything like that to be able to do the two-way synchronous communication. And then the last thing, which was an economic issue, primarily directed to the financial situation that we're in for most patients, is that, typically if you were to waive or a copay or a deductible, that would be considered fraud by the Office of Inspector General. They waived that component completely. So the Office of Inspector General will not be auditing, or you will not fail on an audit if you waive a copay or a deductible for a patient during this crisis. So patient location, where a patient can be, contemporary, common technology, Skype, FaceTime, Zoom, things like that, and then waiving of copays. Those are the basic differences between traditional and where we are in the moment.
Now, Dr. Rumpakis, do you think those rules are going to stay in place, or are, after this crisis is over, we're going to revert back to the rules that we weren't previously under?
Yeah, I wish I had a great crystal ball on that, Adam. I'll tell you where I'd like to see it if I could. I think that the HIPAA requirements will go back into place, right? I think that those things, because patient privacy is and always will be a primary issue. And I think us as healthcare consumers would appreciate that as well.
Absolutely.
So I think that the HIPAA issues will go back. I think the waiving of the copay and the deductible will go back. I am very hopeful that CMS will see that this has been a good boost for healthcare, and it's allowed practitioners to provide care for their patients with less traffic. And I think that, if we're going to start practicing social distancing and all of those sorts of things, and I don't know where that's all going to end up eventually, but this will prevent congregating in a waiting room, all of that sort of thing. So I'm hopeful that the shortage area requirement and the ability to be able to stay in your home, I hope that those stay in place, right? So we can, the patient can have access to their doctor wherever they're at.
Gotcha. Now, for us healthcare providers and, the insurance companies and just the patient, if you don't mind just giving an overview of, what are the benefits? I mean, as me as a healthcare provider, you as a healthcare provider, Adam as a healthcare provider, where do we benefit? Where does the insurance company benefit? And where does the patient truly benefit? Because I think we really need to have a good perspective of that to understand how powerful telehealth is truly.
Right. So I think that, so I would tell you the economics of telehealth, depending on which code set you use, and we'll talk about that in a minute, could be, it's never going to be equal to a live face-to-face encounter as far as overall aggregate income goes. Because, but on a visit by visit basis, if we stick to just the 99,000 codes, you get paid equally for a telehealth visit using a 992XX code as you would in a face-to-face encounter versus two-way synchronous video. The limitation, of course, is that we can never get to as high of a level of a visit, remotely as we can in a face-to-face encounter, just because of the elements that we can complete safely. What are the advantages to the healthcare provider is obviously in situations like this, but if we go on, you can have access to your patient more greatly. You could probably squeeze more visits in a given time period, right? Mm-hmm. That you can be a little bit more efficient and effective in delivering care. I think telehealth was never, ever designed to replace your in-office care, but only designed to augment it. Also, I think that that's reflected in some of the payment rates for the pure telehealth codes. Those are, very low. I mean, they're $50 or less in general. And so, you're never really going to be able to replace your traditional income. From a standpoint from the insurance carriers, I think that they're going to be able to see, lower claims basis. I think that they're going to be able to have less economic risk on that. But I hope that some of this stuff actually starts to change postures with insurance carriers. Because remember, at the end of the day, the consumer is who pays the insurance carrier. And if the consumer demands change, the consumer will generally always win. And if the consumer wants to have more access and better care, there's going to have to be a way. The market's going to, arbitrate that and be able to come to a conclusion on what works best for all stakeholders.
Absolutely. Oh, go ahead, Adam.
How do we keep the providers engage in this telehealth experience, because if the patient is going through the insurance company, what I found as a little stopgap is that the insurance companies are offering like free services through United Healthcare or Cigna, and then the patient has to do a lot more hoops to get through to the provider. Have you seen anywhere in which we can make sure that doctor-patient interaction or doctor-patient connection stays engaged and not letting the insurance company be the gatekeeper to the patient?
Yeah, that's a great point, Adam. I don't know. Frankly, it's the thing that's frustrating for me is that we have, and for all of the providers out there, we've got various sets of rules that are in place, right? You have a commercial carrier that'll implement something one way. I mean, heck, even all the managed vision care providers start to define an eye exam differently anyways, right? I mean, we don't have any sort of unity on what definitions are. And until we have consistency and unity on policies and definitions, that's always going to be a challenge for the practitioner, because if a commercial carrier says, this is what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, you're kind of bound by contract, and the patient has kind of bound by contract as well in order for them to be able to get their benefits that are in place, right? So I think that's going to be a tough thing.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, this game is going to be very interesting. Because of COVID-19, we're seeing a lot of change in regards to how telehealth is accepted. We're seeing how it can be beneficial to our practice. We're seeing down the road post-COVID that it may also make it easier for patients, of course, to be able to communicate with us and do some, post things as far as when a patient comes into the office and afterwards. But
right.
I'm really concerned about how insurance is going to play a role in this. I mean, like, they can really either make or break us, and I don't see how we can actually just stronghold or take lead with this. So I'm lost in regards to what's going to happen afterwards.
Yeah. The one thing so here's how I kind of look at it. I mean, and doing what I've done for 35 years, kind of behind the scenes, advocating for optometry to have parity with ophthalmology, is that, fortunately, like CMS doesn't group us separately, right? We're considered a physician equally across the board in all respects. So irrespective of your specialty, cardiology, allergy, ophthalmology, optometry, we're completely equal. The other medical carriers are not always so generous with that. They tend to will put us in a box with, certain other type of ancillary care providers rather than a physician, which is getting less and less, but nonetheless, we still run into it. I think the true beneficiary of all of this telehealth is going to be the consumer, because I think at the end of the day, they're going to be the ones that sit there and go, you know what? I was kind of uncomfortable with this before, but now, I can get on, talk to my doctor, see him face to face, describe what's going on. I can, take my, go like this, and I can take my flashlight, take a look at what's going on. My doctor can say, hey, you can do this and do this. I'm going to call a script in. And the patient did it from the comfort of wherever they're at. I mean, I look at where online shopping was 20 years ago, and people going, oh, it's never going to take off. And you look at all of us and what we consume via Amazon or whatever your online provider of choice is. We adopted that pretty easily, right? So I think that when we start to look at how healthcare is brought to the consumer, rather than them having to seek it out, we're going to have to bring it to them. And that's what I think this is, maybe the very beginning of starting to see some formidable change that takes place there.
Yeah, it's funny that you brought up the phone. I was on another podcast webinar with Adam not too long ago, and I was talking about how powerful this device is. And, the main things that I was touching on was that, whenever someone looks at a website, over 50% of the folks are using their cell phone. When people are seeking their information, they're first going to social media platforms. They go to your Instagram, they go to your reviews. They're consuming all that information through this device here. And on top of that, you look at disruptive technology. How are we using this, especially when it comes to healthcare, through this? So I do strongly feel that this will predict how, the future will be shaped when it comes to the healthcare system, and also with telehealth, with all the information that you just mentioned as well.
I couldn't agree more. And as we start to see different types of technologies, you had mentioned our conference call that we were on the other day together in that meeting. and we start to think about, and I'm going to bring up the bad topic. I know it's not telehealth, but if it's about, we start to talk about remote eye care in whatever way. You start to think about how quickly, if I was a manufacturer and I was, my job was to do retinal imagery, how could I retrofit a device to fit on that device you just held up? That is faultless, that I can go ahead and hold up to my eye. It maintains the appropriate spacing to allow entrance into the pupil appropriately. Go into a dark room, let your pupil dilate, for 1 minute, dark adapt, go ahead and snap a photo, take that photo, send it to somebody. The innovators that are out there are going to find opportunity to create greater and greater things. We talk about online refraction, and as long, as a hot topic that is. I do truly believe that if used in the right way, and if we can maintain an appropriate ecosystem where the doctor has control of the results of a remote refraction, and then can interface with that patient individually. So the doctor has the ability to transform those findings into a prescription. That could be another huge boon for us to be able to do things. I mean, just imagine the day where the patient had 50% of their examination taken care of before they even walked in the door.
Yeah.
And then all you had to do was complete the health exam and let them go, right? And now you can take that online refraction that they completed already through your portal, right? Only you got the results, and then they can now go ahead and complete the examination. I mean, I think we're in a transformative time, and it'll be very interesting to see what the innovators bring to market to allow us to be able to expand our services beyond the confines of what we view now as telehealth.
Now, with the current thoughts on telehealth, would you say there's a separation between the patient trying to do the exam fully from home and what I'm also hearing in rural America, where they're having a hard time finding doctors, where the doctor is just remote, but the patient is actually in a standalone brick and mortar location, and they have the OCT and the visual field and the fundus, but the doctor is actually monitoring or doing the refraction remote or looking at the imaging remote, but the patient is actually in a brick and mortar. Do you see that as this quote unquote still like semi-telehealth, or is that just a remote processing of the exam?
Well, that's actually a remote examination, and those models actually exist today, right? I mean, there are companies that are providing things where they have a tech in a brick and mortar with the patient who's doing the fundus photograph, who's doing the OCT. Those are not going to be separately billable types of procedures, because those are simply substituting for the remote retinal exam, right, that the doctor would be doing as part of their comprehensive exam. But it does allow those to be for a doctor to be able to monitor 5 lanes at the same time, right? And they could be doing, I could switch over to camera 1, I could be seeing Daryl, and I could be saying, so Daryl, tell me what brought you in today. Boom, boom, boom. I could have somebody doing a remote refraction through a phoropter for which I'm getting the readings. I can then convert that refraction into an actual prescription based upon the patient's needs and my expertise. We can go ahead and conduct the physical exam through a slit lamp that's broadcast to me. I can do the retinal exam, broadcast to me. That would compromise a comprehensive eye exam, right? In 92004-014, as long as all the components were done of it. Today, telehealth, as the traditional definition, none of the 92,000 codes are even covered for ophthalmic services. So I think, Adam, you could start to broaden that definition, and I think you can start to see how we can take technology, and I am hopeful. Again, this is the optimist in me, not the optometrist in me, but the optimist in me, always tries to see how does a crisis create innovation, and how can we create a better way to do what we do? How can we enhance the consumer experience? How can we still maintain a high quality of care that we deliver, but make it easier, better, faster, right? I mean, that's what it's all about. It's all about the experience at the end of the day without compromising the quality or the patient outcomes. And if it takes something like this, I mean, I think one of the individuals on the call the other day says, we don't like to waste a crisis, right? A crisis is a great place to innovate and be able to come out with maybe opportunities or outcomes that we never even contemplated before.
Hey, Darryl, we're getting quite a lot of love on LinkedIn. So I'm just getting
Okay.
we're getting a lot of love on LinkedIn. A couple questions are being asked. I think we skipped over some of the basics, and let's not assume that everybody's watched a webinar on telehealth before, because not everybody has been able to keep up with this. So I would love if we would just kind of go through and what is a telehealth exam? Like what are we actually doing in that process of that exam? What kind of conditions are we actually able to treat or diagnose, and what would the steps be? Because there's a lot of follow-up questions on here of people asking about ancillary testing that can be done, applications that you can use, try home, take home things that they can add on. But I think we need to first address what is a telehealth, like what is the actual components? What would somebody be doing besides talking to them on the phone? Like, how do you separate that in actual telehealth exam so we can add other parts in? Because I don't want to let anybody get lost that may not have gotten the basics of telehealth down before.
Okay. Great. So let me try to summarize as best I can, and then pop in with questions, and we can get more, granular as we're doing stuff. So telehealth, by definition, is not a telephone call, although a telephone call is now allowed, but I'll get into that separately, okay? A telehealth encounter is a face-to-face synchronous two-way video and audio communication between the patient and the doctor. Just like y'all are seeing us here on the screen and what we're doing, that's how it is, going two ways. The code sets that are available for telehealth are the traditional 99,000 codes, 992XX. And one of the nice things is about this emergency, all of these codes now apply to both new patients and established patients, whereas before it was primarily only established patients that could participate in a telehealth encounter. We also have a couple of codes, G2012 and G2010, that allow for a virtual check-in or a patient to be able to snap a photo or record a video and send it to their doctor for analysis. There's also digital evaluations, which are not like traditional 99,000 codes, but their code range 99421 through 423, and they simply where, let's say Darryl was a patient of mine, and Darryl contacted me and he said, John, I got something going on with my eye. And we're doing this two ways, right, over video. And he shows me his eye, I'm looking at it, and I'm going to either, prescribe some action for him, but I'm going to follow him up for an entire week. And so that allows me to be able to use the online digital evaluation, which tracks cumulative time spent with the patient in two-way video. Then I can do a telephone call that's initiated by a patient. So Darryl calls me up and he says, hey, John, I got this going on. I haven't seen him in the past 7 days, and it doesn't lead to a visit in the next 24 hours. And he says, this is what I got going on. I can talk to him. If I spend a certain amount of time per call, I can bill for those services as well. And those services are 99441 through 99443. As far as other types of ancillary testing that you do, nothing is really approved for ancillary testing right now. There is no, I can't do a anterior segment photography, for example, and bill for a photo. I can't do a posterior seg photography and bill for a photo. I can't do visual training. I can't do a contact lens progress evaluation where the patient has no specific complaint of a problem, right? Just to follow up. The virtual check-ins allow me to proactively reach out to the patient. So I can, let's say if I saw Darryl 2 weeks ago, I put him on a new dry eye medication and I wanted to follow up with him. So I call him up, I say, hey, Darryl, I want to know how you're doing. New medication working? Are you having any adverse effects, any problems? Does it seem to be helping your eyes? Are they feeling better? He and I talk for at least a minimum of 5 minutes. That's a virtual check-in, right? And I can bill for that, whether it's on phone or whether it's two-way video, right? So there's a lot of ways that we can apply telehealth, but again, in this emergency time, the only thing that's really been relaxed are the patient or origination place, the OIG waiving things, and the use of common technology. They haven't expanded the code set really at all for ancillary testing, Adam.
So what about something like maybe like color vision? Because there are some apps that you can do, and you can do a D15 color vision from a tablet. Could that be done remote and be billed? Have you thought about anything like that?
So I haven't, but I know that the code itself for color vision is not an approved code for telehealth at all. So whether it was an anomalous scope or a D15 administered that way, probably would not get reimbursed. But a patient, if the doctor felt it was medically necessary and it was appropriate to do in that particular situation, then the patient would probably have to pay for it themselves out of pocket if the doctor was going to do it. But right now, not covered by a traditional insurer via remote synchronous communication.
All right, there we got a question from LinkedIn. Dr. Ken is asking, since telehealth is acceptable now, do you think the state boards are going to be given all clear with using telehealth? Because right now, most state boards have been anti-telehealth, pushing it away. I think mainly because of the refractions. But do you see them at some point actually changing course on how they feel about telehealth and getting something different to come out of AOA or the particular state boards? And this is Dr. Ken from LinkedIn asking this question.
Great question. Thanks for asking that. I think the state boards are going to be evaluating all sorts of different things. I mean, their job, remember, a state board is not there to protect a doctor. The state board is there to protect the public from the doctor, right? And so if there's methodologies that are developed to be able to maintain high standards of care that could be the clinical equivalent of a live face-to-face visit versus a video face-to-face visit, I think that the state boards are going to start to examine these things and make decisions. I do worry about, Adam, like you brought up the refraction issue, I do worry about states that have legislated themselves into a corner because if they've passed a very restrictive law, how do you go back and unpass a law in 1 year when the year before you said, hey, Meg, that will never happen. That's dangerous to the consumer. Now, all of a sudden, it's good for the consumer. I think you're going to be in a hard position. And I mean, I think that rational minds will make rational decisions about these things. But I think that any type of a situation where the constituency of practitioners has had their income reduced or their livelihood reduced or eliminated, I think that there's going to be a call for action to start to develop some wide-scale policies on these things that are going to be, that people can have some appetite for, as long as it doesn't put the public at risk, which is their primary purpose.
We have another question here from, looks like Facebook. This is Dr. Lena down in Miami. Hey guys, thanks for doing this. I do have questions regarding vision insurance benefits for telehealth. Example, VSP, Spectera. I called VSP to ask about benefits and they were not able to answer, not sure what to charge the patient or how to bill the vision insurance.
So can we use vision insurance for telehealth? Because they're asking, we're using a 99 code. Could we bill that 99 code to a VSP or IMED, seeing though VSP and IMED technically should be a routine service? And if we're under a watch, it shouldn't be doing routine services. Do you see any conflict of doing that using vision insurance? Just to kind of shorten her question.
Yeah, I do have. So Lena, thank you for the question. I'm a little bit baffled myself because I haven't seen the managed vision care companies come out with clear and distinct policies on what their waiver is going to be during this type of a situation. I'm aware that VSP put on a webinar on telehealth about 2 weeks ago. I don't know if they have updated policies published to their website or not. So that would be the very first place I would go rather than giving them a call. I do know right now, traditionally, telehealth is not allowed for the 92002, 012004, or 014 code. I don't know what the managed vision care companies are allowing people to bill for patients to use their benefits remotely. So I would go to their websites and I would imagine that they've got to have a public policy published in some way to give their doctors and members, the consumers, some guidance as well on how to do things.
Yeah. There's a great question here as well on LinkedIn, Adam. I just saw this one's from Dr. Parkin. He said, in an audit, will we be required to keep phone log and video conferences with patients?
Great question. So the coding requirements, remember, the only thing that CMS has relaxed is the patient aspect and the technology we can use in the waiver of the copay. Your medical record still has to be just as perfect. So if I'm using a 99201 or 99212 or whatever it's going to be, I have to still maintain my history, my physical exam, my medical decision making in my clinical record. If I'm using a time-based codes. So if I'm using the online digital evaluation codes 99421 through 423, I have to track the cumulative time that I'm maintaining over a 7 calendar day period of time. If I'm using a telephone visit, I have to maintain a time record in what was discussed during the course of that. You are not obligated in any way to record the two-way video interaction. So I don't have to record my Skype or my FaceTime recording, but I do have to maintain a medical record that has the same amount of detail in it that would support whatever code I'm using to bill to the carrier.
Gotcha.
All right, we got another one. We getting some live interaction. You're blowing up.
they see the man is on, so they're like, hey, we gotta suck it all out of him.
They're trying to get it. So Chris Peebles, I probably say that, Peebles wants to know thoughts on other technology that may be synergistic with telemedicine, home monitoring, and remote testing. So my thought would be using no-talk vision, maybe 4C Home, or using an eye care home where they're checking the eye pressure, and then I'm having a exam with the patient going over it. Could I then bill a 213 exam, and I'm going over the eye care home that I sent with them, or the 4C Home that they're using at home, and going over the results along with doing an examination? Do you think there's a way to synergize using that, using telehealth?
So another great question, and I hope my answer is as good as the question is, okay? Because, so first of all, late last week on Wednesday of last week, the FDA also relaxed some of its standards to allow manufacturers to bring new technology to market without having to go through the entire FDA process of approval. So they relaxed that. Primarily, they relaxed it with things like you just mentioned, devices that can measure visual acuity, devices that can capture an image or do a visual field. They spoke specifically to tonometry, but it has to be NCT or through the lid. It can't be something else that's done. So if I look at ancillary things and how they can harmonize with a visit, remember that if I'm using a traditional 992XX code, remember that I can't bill extra for like a confrontational field or something like that. That's part of a 99,000 code. I can't bill for tonometry separately. That's not there's not a code even for tonometry that's a separate code. It's just part of my office visit. But to your point, Adam, you said, can I bill a 99213? So traditionally a 99213 may be at the upper limit of a telehealth encounter, right? But if I do have those elements and I have a device that can measure those elements that allow me to do appropriate clinical decision making, then remember the number of elements in the examination that I'm able to measure and perform does elevate the level of the overall visit that I'm getting. So if I'm in a 99213, I think the national average right now is $73.05 from CMS on that, which is significantly higher than most of the telehealth encounters that you're going to do. So potentially, depending on the technology, the number of exam elements that you do could raise the level of the code that you're using.
Okay, good. All right, Dr. Glover, what you got next for us?
These are all great questions. I'm sitting here trying to take notes, man. I know we touched a decent amount of, right? I know we touched on a decent amount of coding, but the one thing in a lecture I sat in the other day that they really stress is the time aspect. Time plays a big role in when it comes to coding. So I really want, if you don't mind, just talking about the different amounts of time you need in order to have to reach the different levels for the various codes. I think that's a key aspect in regards to this.
Well, let's talk basically about the virtual check-in service. That's the one that G2012 pays about $15 or so. That's the one that the doctor can proactively either call the patient or do a two-way video communication. The minimum time you have to spend on that is 5 minutes. Okay, so not time intensive at all. But you do have to record the start time, end time in your medical record and what you talked about, okay? The online digital evaluations are pretty straightforward and simple. So remember, there's 3 codes, 99421, 422, and 423. 99421 5 to 10 minutes pays about $15.50. 99422 is 11 minutes to 20 minutes, pays about $31. And then 99423 is anything greater than 21 minutes, okay? Now remember, those times are cumulative times over a 7-day calendar period of time. So if I spent 5 minutes on day one and I called the patient again or did a two-way communication with the patient on day 3, that was 7 minutes, right? Now I'm up to 12. And then if I spent one more thing during a thing and it put me over the 21-minute cumulative time over those 7 days, that would then be a 99423. That's why maintaining an accurate medical record, and when you brought up, Daryl, about the amount of time that we have to spend, that's why it's so critical. Because think about it this way. The difference between 20 minutes and 21 minutes is almost a 40% difference, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I want to make sure that I'm getting credit for what I'm actually doing appropriately, right? So the other time limits are just in the phone call, not the virtual check-in, but the actual phone calls. And typically prior to this crisis, those were not reimbursed by Medicare, but Medicare relaxed their standards on those and are paying for just plain telephone services. Those are 99441, 442, 443. Those are, again, 5 to 10 minutes, 11 to 20, and greater than 21 minutes. Those are per call, right? Pay $14.40, $28, and $41 respectively for the different codes. And those are per call, not cumulative time. The online digital evaluations are cumulative time done via two-way video over a 1-week period of time.
And I know there are some codes and modifiers that you need to use when doing that. Can you go over those two, please?
Sure. 2 basic things. So traditionally, going back again before the crisis, place of service was place of service 2, which said telehealth services. And then I was supposed to use a modifier 95 on the given code to indicate that it was provided via synchronous two-way communication. What Medicare said to try to create the least amount of rejected claims if doctors were getting things wrong, they said, hey guys, leave the place of service as it is. Place of service 11, which is your office, right? We always use that. Your EHRs are pre-programmed to place of service 11, but you still have to use the 95 modifier when you're doing telehealth services, okay? So that way it indicates that it was provided via two-way video. So those are the real things. The GT modifier was eliminated by Medicare in January of 2018. Bless you.
Thank you.
Eliminated in January of 2018, so we don't use the GT modifier any longer.
So has all the other providers followed suit with that? Because I put in O2 modifier last week. So do I have all of them followed suit with using that O2 modifier that Medicare has said, or is that just Medicare and they may follow later? Like how are those rules different?
Yeah. Again, private carriers, private commercial carriers are doing, what they want to do. But I will tell you that most of them are trying to model themselves along with Medicare. So that way there's not multiple different types of arrangements out there on how to submit a claim. Because, think about it this way. You don't have the same office support that you have there, right? You don't have the ability to, the timeliness of a rejected claim and then a resubmission and all of that sort of thing. That's difficult. So I think everybody's trying to group together, make it as easy as possible for the patient to get the care that they need, as well as the doctor to have a streamlined billing process. So maintain place of service 11, use modifier 95 on your services.
All right, we got another great question from Dr. Desmond Parkin out of LinkedIn here. As far as malpractice insurance, do I need to have a rider on my policy for telehealth? Are they covering us based on if I miss a retinal detachment because they said that it was blurry or they had something in their eye and what they really had was a floater and it wasn't allergies or dry eye? How are the insurance carriers dealing with telehealth? Am I covered from my house with telehealth, or do I have to be at my office?
Yeah. So my understanding, and again, not an attorney, not a malpractice insurance agent, so just giving you practical experience on this. Number one, your malpractice policy doesn't specify specific codes. Your malpractice policy specifically covers you for your area of expertise as far as based upon what your clinical abilities are and decision-making go. So if you have an encounter that you're doing where you have a suspicion, just like you would be doing face-to-face. So if I'm talking to Daryl over a two-way video communication, and he says, I just got some blur, and I might say, well, Daryl, tell me a little bit about the blur that you're doing, okay? Maybe I would try to do a confrontation visual field with him over the phone, right? Go ahead, cover one eye, look directly at the bridge of my nose right here, bring your finger from the side, tell me when you first notice it, because I can still watch his gaze, right? I can still, do that sort of thing, but maybe I can start to see, wow, he's way far up. Now I can start to ask some other questions. Was it like a curtain? Did you see flashes and floaters preceding it? Those types of things. So your clinical decision-making based upon how good of a history you're doing with that patient is going to determine, is that an emergency that I need to get into the office and go see him and, put on all the PPE and all that kind of stuff and see the patient? Or do I feel comfortable, hey, follow it. Let's check in on you in the next couple of days and see how it's going. Your malpractice covers your decision-making and your expertise. How you choose to use that is up to you. But these telehealth vehicles that we have are just one more tool in our toolbox to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out down the road. I mean, I don't know. I'm lost on that one. And that's one thing that I do worry about. I mean, we're all great clinicians, but, as we mentioned before, there's nothing like doing that physical examination. I mean, we really have to just utilize this as an additional piece to the patient care and just not solely rely on it. And that's one thing that I do worry about with some healthcare professionals, being that we're experiencing how great telemedicine is right now and how much more relaxed patient care is. I just hope that we don't, mess up and just rely solely on that when, we really need to go into that office and really see that patient and really do that dilation, really touch that eye to see what's really taking place on that end.
It's funny because you're spot on with that. The changes that have taken place in coding have gotten much more specific. So you take the change that came with extended ophthalmoscopy in January of this year, where it used to be just initial extended ophthalmoscopy and subsequent. Then they changed it and they said, no, it's going to be peripheral. And now they demanded that you have to do scleral indentation as part of a peripheral examination if you're going to bill for it, or you're going to look at the central retina only. And so they now are starting to attach techniques to codes to start to differentiate and make sure that that quality examination or the outcome for that patient is done. And, whether or not, whatever technology you're using to capture the retina today, whether it's an Optimap or ultra wide field or, whatever you're using to do that, remember, that's still a 2D picture, right? That's not giving you depth. Right. That's not giving you the ability to manipulate the globe. That's not giving you things. Wonderful technology allows you to see things you never probably would have been able to see before, especially through the layers of the retina. But just, it has its limitations as well. Yeah, absolutely.
We have another question from LinkedIn. They're still coming in. So OB from South Africa. What's up, OB? He's asking, as far as using telehealth in other parts of the world where internet is a little bit more expensive and there are challenges as far as access to patients, how do you see telehealth working in other countries? The one thing I was thinking about was, a lot of people do mission trips and go on different things to go to countries that may not have enough providers in that area. But what if there was a way to set up where I could be at my house or at my office and the equipment was there? And that way, all you needed was the equipment and the staff. I mean, do you see telehealth expanding to other parts of the country or becoming easier to access as far as internet or equipment for other parts of the country? He's from South Africa, but that can be used from anywhere.
Yeah. So I see. Let's take a project that Google has undertaken in India. Right, they're out there. They have people on scooters going around because they don't have enough providers for the population, and they have people on scooters going out into the countryside and taking pictures of the retina of individuals so they can catch diabetes and retinal disorders at earlier stages. So I think that the broad acceptance of remote examination, however you want to classify that, whatever your state or country laws allow you to do or not do, I think as we get greater access to broadband services, I think as we get greater access to technology, I think that, I mean, you guys remember watching Star Trek, years ago? I'm dating myself again, right? But they had the whole thing, and that's what the diagnostic device was. I mean, you start to think about today how artificial intelligence combined with technology is helping us with our clinical decision making. You start to think about, Daryl, you held up your iPhone and you said how this device changed the face of how we communicate in every respect. I also, really believe that those types of transformational shifts that we have with technology combined with good clinical protocols is going to be able to enhance the care you deliver no matter where in the world you live, because the consumer, the patient, the healthcare standards are going to demand, if we can do it, let's do it.
Yeah.
Take care of the person.
Great point. Great point. Dr. Ramsey, any other questions there on LinkedIn, or we?
I'm looking here right now to see if we have another good one, but no, so far I think we've answered all the questions. You've been really good, Dr. Rumpakis, on getting a lot of the questions out. Where do you see any technologies coming into place? Anything that you see that should be, like I mentioned color vision, but I could also think of an Amsler grid, being done remotely and patients being able to engage. I mean, there are some things that we can do remote. Where do you see technology playing in, or what would you like to see as far as technology engaging to make the telehealth exam more robust? Because the hard part is, if we only have a phone and a computer, yes, I could think of adding on clips and things to the phone and to the computer, but then you got to mail that back and forth to the patient. So, there's a limitation on that. Where do you think technology is going to go as far as add-ons to make the telehealth exam be able to do more than conjunctivitis and dry eye and allergies, as far as what we treat remotely?
Right. Well, I guess I break it down a little bit differently, not so much from a procedure basis, but from a technology basis. So let's think about what we do during the course of a normal exam, right? We do a case history. We do some entrance testing that we can then start to determine binocularity, eye movements, right? Motilities, fields, those types of things. We evaluate the pressure in the eye, and then we do a refraction, and then we look at the eye physically with a slit lamp and an ophthalmoscope, direct, indirect, whatever you're going to use, right? How many of those things can be replaced with an image? Okay, because really, you call it what you want, a phone. I call this an image capture device, right? That's what this does. So depending on how I can capture the image, the quality of the image, how it's transmitted to me, could that not replace certain aspects or meet the minimum CPT requirement to allow me to fulfill that, right? Based upon what the FDA says as they approve certain things like this. So what can I capture with an image? What can't I capture with an image? And what types of things am I able to do with a face-to-face encounter? Is there a way that I can create a program or an algorithm that measures the accuracy? So I'm looking right into my video camera right now. Could that video camera on my computer be designed to capture loss of fixation, right? So as I'm doing an application with a visual field or an Amsler grid or whatever, could I use technology instead of me saying, look right here, or look at my pen light or do whatever? Could I be able to create a device that uses that technology to maintain fixation? I've got something else covering my eye or whatever it's doing here, and I'm able to start to replace some of the clinical elements. I think, Adam, again, going back to what I said earlier, I think these types of situations drive innovation, and those innovators that can see how to create things and be able to demonstrate clinically that there's no loss of quality of care or we're not adversely affecting patient outcomes. I think those types of things are going to probably be lasting, right? That's part of the transformational process as we, change our profession and every profession.
Yeah, that's great insight, great perspective. There's a ton of platforms out there when it comes to telehealth, and there's some that are more specific for our industry. Do you have any recommendations? Do you have a product that people could use? I mean, what's your your perspective in regards to what's the best telehealth platform when it comes to eye care. And I know it's going to be different for everyone, depending if you're corporate,
right.
if you're private, even though we are practicing total eye care.
Right.
But what do you recommend for the listeners out there?
Well, full disclosure, so I have to make sure that everybody knows this. I am not a salesperson in any way, shape, or form, but I am the reimbursement and compliance consultant for Eye Care Live. And it's probably the most prevalent or widely known platform in eye care specifically for doing that. A couple of things I should say, though. In the telehealth rules, you do not have to, there's no requirement to use a platform, okay? As long as you're using two-way synchronous communication through a HIPAA secure portal, whether that's through your website, a specific platform, your EHR, an insurance carrier may have a specific platform that they have and they want you to use. So there's not any specific demand that you have to use a platform. However, I will tell you the benefits of a platform. Number one, when we go back, and as I said at the beginning of the conversation, I do think the HIPAA protections are going to go back into place. I don't think that those will stay relaxed. So if you're used to doing something through a HIPAA secure portal, I think that's very good for both your messaging as well as your two-way capture. Number two, most of the platforms have the ability to at least take you through an appropriate case history, your physical examination, medical decision-making, track time automatically, like we were talking about, Daryl, to make sure that the encounter is tracking time, and the platforms can integrate with your EHR. So I think there's a number of benefits to using a platform, even though one isn't required, okay? And in my opinion, the one that's most prevalent out there right now is Eye Care Live. Gotcha.
And I know Dr. Adam Ramsey, he was going back and forth between Eye Care Live and also DoxyMe. And if you don't mind explaining, your perspective and your experience with that as well, Dr. Ramsey.
I have used Eye Care Live as well. The only thing I like Eye Care Live when I have my full staff and I'm in the office and say the patient isn't there, because then I can delegate, I can move it around, I can have it scheduled by somebody else. They can do some of the stuff before I log in, and make sure the patient has downloaded the app and stuff like that before I log in. I liked Doxy because it was very simple and the patient only needed a web address. And they can click on there and I can get in and I'm talking to the patient immediately. So there is not a delay in being able to connect with the patient, especially if somebody's in pain. It's really hard to tell them that my eye's in pain and, it's bloodshot red and it's swollen, and then say, hey, but I need you to put this in. I need you to put in your insurance. I need you to put in your credit card information. And I need you to do this before I can even see you or talk to you, which was a disconnect. And I know they're making some changes on the platform. So I anticipate Eye Care Live doing a simplified version pretty soon. But Doxy just gave you, it's a simplified platform. The only problem with Doxy is that it does not connect to your EHR. It does not give you the visual acuity that Eye Care Live also gives you. It doesn't give you some of the other things in there. So I think both things play a role. And I think the fact that Eye Care Live is made for us, I think in the end, Eye Care Live is probably going to end up being the best one and what everybody's going to use. But I think in an emergency standpoint, when somebody's in pain right now, you want to connect with them, there needs to be a simplified way to get connected to the patient, especially when I'm at home by myself and it's 11 o'clock at night. Do I want to have to go through all those steps with a patient just to actually connect with them? So I've used both of them. I still have them. I just think for the different platforms, it's going to be different. We have another question from LinkedIn.
Can I finish up on one thing real quick? So I got asked during one of the webinars I was doing recently, a doc was telling me, he goes, well, all I have up on my computer screen, he goes, on one half of my screen, I've got my FaceTime going on at my FaceTime window, and on the other half of my screen, or it was a Skype window, whatever, and the other half of the screen, he had logged into his office and had his EHR open. And so he was just having two windows open simultaneously. And the question was, does that work okay? Is that all right? And, my response was that meets every single requirement during this relaxed period of time, right? If we're not in a relaxed period of time, having the FaceTime or Skype is not going to work because there's no HIPAA protection in. I should tell those individuals out there who do use Zoom as a video platform, Zoom does have a HIPAA compliant platform that they offer as well. That people can use conventional video technology, but has a HIPAA secure method of delivering that.
Yeah, I mean,
So I
both of you hit on some great points. I think the main key thing with telehealth is we have to realize that it's all about access, right? You know, if a patient can't come in and see you, they have to be able to access that platform to communicate with you. We also have to make sure that when it comes to using that device, that cell phone, that computer, that it's easy for them to access and have that communication, that dialogue with you when you're on that audio or that video platform as well. So, you know, access is going to be a key thing when it comes to telehealth.
Right. And the other thing that's nice about those platforms is that they automatically fulfill the requirement that the patient had to initiate the encounter, right?
Yeah.
Which is so important.
Yeah. Dr. Ramsey, what's that other question before we close it down here, man? We've been going for almost an hour now, and we probably could go for another couple of hours, but I know we're all busy men and we have family and other business to take care of. But let's get that other question and we'll close it up here.
All right, the last question I had here was Kim Powell from LinkedIn said, how is this going to affect staff? And do you think we're going to need more or less staff, or how do staff play a role in this? Because, you know, a lot of times the offices are shut down and a lot of the staff are furloughed. And do you think telehealth is going to provide a platform in which staff are needed more to engage? Because maybe we're able to see more patients and we're seeing them remotely and somebody's in charge of our telehealth platforms. Or do you see it as something where we need less staff or less engagement? Like, how do you think staff play a role in this?
So this will be a personal opinion, right? So I'm a big believer in, I'm a huge believer in delegation, right? I believe that optometry has been stuck in the mindset of being the data collector and the data analyzer for far too long, and that optometry needs to branch out and start to really be, as optometrists, as physicians, we need to analyze the data, not be the one that's doing every single bit of testing. So my personal opinion is whether we are in a situation where we're communicating or capturing more information remotely, we're going to need more staff rather than less staff. I think that our technicians and our office teams, however we have them broken up, are going to be more essential than ever. That being said, do need to talk about a couple limitations. The three types of providers in our world that can provide telehealth are physicians, nurse practitioners, and physician's assistants. So ophthalmic techs cannot provide telehealth services as a billing entity. Optometry technicians or your staff cannot provide telehealth visits to meet the requirement of a billing provider. It always has to be done from the doctor's perspective themselves, nurse practitioner or a PA. But as far as individuals who are directing things, so Adam, you were talking about if you were remote, but you had somebody in your office, you need more staff to be able to help you to get that patient effectively done, right? So you can then leverage your services across a wider base of patient needs more efficiently and more effectively. So that's my personal aspect, is I think staff aren't going to be replaced because of this. I think we're going to need our teams more than ever.
I agree.
Well, I wanna leave on one point. I would love to just have your perspective on, post COVID-19. Do you feel this is going to truly change the consumer, the patient perspective on how they should obtain eye care?
Yeah, I do. I think I think the patient psyche has been rattled. I'll just say the consumer psyche has been pretty rattled, right? I mean, I think about myself. I think about, okay, when's the next time I'm going to go into a crowded movie theater, right, to go see a movie? I'm going to probably be a little bit more hesitant than I am going to go to the doctor. I do think that patients are going to have much higher expectations of us for being responsible medical professionals to take appropriate precautions. I would tell you this, even during the COVID-19, I'm sure Daryl and Adam, you guys have touched on this in your previous podcasts. I think the primary thing that doctors need to do now is stay in front of their patients. However you're communicating, be foremost front and center with them to tell them that you're there to help them through telehealth, that here's the steps that we're going to be taking when we reopen, right? And start to do those things in practice. I was reviewing a document that a doctor sent me the other day, and he goes, well, we're putting these disinfection these protocols in place. I said, great, do them in front of the patient. Right? Don't do them between the patients. Do it in front of the patient. It has so much more impact. The patient's sitting there going, wow, look at it. I mean, if you're going to do it between, but do certain elements right in front of them. It's just like when you wash your hands or you wipe down your slit lamp prior to doing things, you know, and I know that the patient has, that sets a nonverbal communication standard, right, that you're doing with them. And I think post-COVID, our volumes are probably going to be a little bit less, right, until people get acclimated or we have a medical solution to this issue that's going on. But I mean, we're still front and center. Don't ever forget that optometry provides 77% of all first-time eye care encounters and 66% of all ongoing eye care in the United States today. You got 320 million people, the majority of which have some sort of visual need. We're going to be a necessary workforce out there once things start to reopen and doing things. So I think that we have a very bright future. It's going to be a little bit different. We'll all adjust, right? But I think you need to be proactive in being able to, rather than say, oh, poor me, is sit there and say, how can I take advantage of this opportunity and really shine in my community in whatever ways you think you can. But, you know, being there for your community and those that are less, you know, fortunate than you are and being able to do stuff. I know you got a lot of stresses on your minds right now, but I think it's something that you have an opportunity to shine.
And with this platform with Defocus Media, what would you like to tell all your colleagues out there that may be more of your traditionalists versus someone that's more into innovation? What advice would you have for them? Because that's what's going to also really change the game. Because it's one thing for a patient to want something, but if we as an industry don't work together to move forward, you know, it's not going to happen and we're going to be at a loss. What advice and tips do you have for them to be more of a forward thinker like yourself and Dr. Ramsey?
I would say, don't be afraid of the 6-letter word called change. You know, I mean, I guess the way you can look at it is a couple things. You know, if you don't do anything, change is going to happen, and things may innovate past you, right? The one thing about a crisis like this is that we have some visibility into the future, a little bit, maybe very myopic, you know, not too much in knowing how this is going to turn out scientifically and medically and stuff. But I'm an optimist and think we're going to survive this as a, you know, human race, and we're going to do okay. So if you can anticipate change, embrace a portion of it. Maybe you're not at that innovator level, right, Daryl, where you're embracing it all. But man, if you can start to say, well, you know what, we can do things a little bit differently. Maybe we're not rocking the boat, changing things, but I can anticipate it a little bit. When I can, you know, anticipate, embrace, and direct change for the benefit of my patients or my staff or myself, that's what creates opportunity. That's what is going to be able to create your opportunity to go through this and be able to come out on the other side. And I think that we do have to team together. I think, you know, we mentioned state boards, we mentioned insurance carriers, we mentioned patients. I mean, if we look at all of the different stakeholders in healthcare, we have to work together more than ever right now to make sure that we all come out of this. And all of those individuals that we call patients, those human beings behind the name and the word patient, those are who we got to take care of. And we got to put at the front of our, you know, right in our sights.
Well, for those that want to have more dialogue and continue this conversation with you, what's the best contact information if they want to just reach out and have that conversation or hire you for consulting as well?
Yeah, so I have, I'll give you my direct email address and I'll give you 2 websites, okay? So my email address is John, John, at prmi.com. My primary website is www.prmi.com. And then my coding website for my coding products is codesafeplus.com, codesafeplus.com. And if you have questions or anything like that I can help with, don't hesitate to reach out.
Awesome. Well, we greatly appreciate you hanging out with us today. We know we bombarded you with 1,000,001 questions, but look, LinkedIn loves you, Facebook loves you, social media loves you. We wanted to take full advantage. Dr. Adam Ramsey, thanks for always being a team member and hanging out with Defocus Media. Everyone, thanks for tuning in. It's your favorite optometrist, Dr. Daryl Glover. We look forward to hanging out with you guys next time. Until then, stay safe, stay positive, stay blessed, and have a great one. We love you guys.
Thank you. Great. Thank you for having me.